Hello, this is Olivia, and welcome to my channel, Justice in Her Hands, with a new original story. Let's begin. The gravel popped under the tires as Colin pulled away, and the sound felt like a door slamming on my life. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, a slouching rectangle of gray boards tucked between pines that whispered like they were keeping secrets. The air was damp and metallic, and when I stepped inside, my breath fogged a little from the cool trapped behind the old cedar walls. "You'll rest here," Colin had said. His smile stretched too thin. He took my phone, so you won't doom scroll, and my car keys, so you don't stress yourself. He kissed my forehead and smelled like aftershave and impatience. Then, he was gone, and the silence sat on my chest. I did what I always do when I feel small. I straightened things. The sink hissed, the water ran rusty, and the refrigerator gave a stubborn hum that meant the generator still had some life. Dust floated in the shadows like slow snow. I ran my hand along the hallway, fingertips catching the splinters in the wood, and every board creaked like it was tattling. Grief rolled up my throat the way it does, sour and hot, but I swallowed it. Colin meant well, I told myself. He just wants me safe. That's what good sons do, except good sons do not take car keys. Or phones. Itching rose along my scalp. I kept walking. At the bedroom door, I paused because something cold threaded across my skin. Not a draft. Something else. I opened the closet to find a row of old coats still holding the shape of the men who used to hunt here. My husband, Martin, his brother, cousins with loud voices and soft eyes. Cedar punched the air. I pushed the coats aside and saw it. A deer mount tucked on the back wall, its glass eyes too black for this dim light. One eye had a pinpoint of red deep in it, faint, but alive. I leaned in, heart thudding, and there it was. Behind the glossy pupil, a tiny lens, a camera, watching, recording, waiting. I froze, hand hovering in the dust like a caught bird. Every hair on my arms lifted. The red dot blinked once, lazy, as if it knew I was there. I tasted copper in my mouth and felt the tremble in my knees that I used to hide from the schoolchildren when I worked the front office. Who put this here? Not Martin. He barely liked the thermostat. Colin? The question landed like a stone in my gut. Peace and quiet. Right. Peace for whom? I shut the closet carefully, palms slick now, and leaned my back against the door. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was old, dead. Then a low click sounded from somewhere in the walls, like a throat clearing. I exhaled through my nose so I would not make a sound. If Colin had done this, he would know when I moved, when I ate, when I cried. He could know everything. The thought made me feel suddenly, fiercely protective of the small, ordinary parts of me that were left. I needed a plan. But first, I needed not to spook whoever might be watching. So I turned on the radio, only static, and set a kettle on the stove the way I always did at home, letting it look like nothing had changed. I slipped back to the closet with a dish towel, acting like I was hunting for blankets, and in one smooth motion, I draped the towel over the deer's face. The red dot vanished into white. My heart slowed one notch, not two, just one. That would have to do for now. I stood in the silence, counting my breaths. I wanted to call Colin and ask why. I wanted to call anyone and say help. But more than that, I wanted to stop being the version of myself who apologized for taking up space. The kettle finally began to whisper. Good. I let it. If someone was listening, they could hear that I was still here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I kept the kettle talking so the silence would not swallow me and took the small vanity mirror off the wall. A trick from the school office days. Use reflection, not direct sight. I walked slow, holding the mirror at an angle, catching corner and ceiling seams. The cabin smelled like old cedar and damp wool. In the hallway, the smoke detector had a second pinhole that did not belong. When I shifted the mirror just right, I caught another faint red wink, the kind that pretends to be nothing until you stare. I dragged a chair beneath it and reached up like I was dusting. A dishcloth draped over the detector looked innocent enough. The red vanished. My pulse did not. At the breaker box, I studied the scribbles in Martin's hand. Kitchen, porch, bunk. Then newer handwriting, blocky and sure. Closet. Loft. Neither label existed back when he was alive. I flipped the closet switch off. In the bedroom, the deer's eye still glowed under the towel, stubborn as a gnat. Battery-powered, then. Maybe cellular. I turned the switch back on and smoothed the list like I had never touched anything. The floorboards near the closet threshold had fresh screws, silver bright against brown wood. Whoever had done it assumed no one would kneel to look. I did. The wood felt cold even through my jeans, and when I leaned close, I heard a faint insect hum beneath, steady, not wild. Electronics. My fingers shook as I fetched a screwdriver from the junk drawer, the one that holds old keys, a dried-out glue stick, the past. I loosened only 2 screws, enough to slide my fingers under and lift. A shallow cavity. Inside sat a small metal lockbox bolted down, vents cut into its sides. A green light pulsed inside the slats like a heartbeat. I did not dare disconnect anything yet. I did not know what going dark would signal. I set a cast-iron Dutch oven upside down over the box like a bell. Maybe it would muffle the thing. Maybe it did nothing. I needed to act as if I believed. In the desk by the window, I found Martin's ledger, and beneath it a manila envelope stamped with a title company's name. My stomach flipped. A copy of a draft transfer of deed lay inside, not executed, not dated in Martin's time. There was a note clipped to it in Colin's handwriting. "We can keep taxes low this way." My mouth went dry. He had mentioned a paperwork favor the week after the funeral. Something quick. I had refused then because my hand would not stop shaking, and I did not want my signature looking drunk. Thank God for the tremor. The kettle began to scream. I let it for a breath, then turned off the flame and poured the water just to feel heat and control. On the very back shelf of the pantry, where Martin kept tackle, I spotted a weatherproof pouch. Inside, a battered flip phone sealed with tape and a folded index card in Martin's crooked letters. "In case the river wins, charge only when needed." I laughed then, a raw, small sound. He who hated gadgets had hidden the one thing I needed. The battery was a sliver from dead. I plugged it into the outlet by the stove and watched the tiny screen blink awake. One bar flickered, then settled. I scrolled through the old contacts and found the person who had stayed when others fled. Nora Pike, the school nurse who brought me casseroles without asking where to set them. My thumbs moved slow, careful. "I'm at the old cabin. Not safe to talk. Text if you can." The message hung with a spinning icon like a held breath. Cued. I left the phone face down on the counter and turned the radio louder so any microphone would catch nothing but static and kettle ghosts. Outside, a gust pushed against the porch and the wind chimes clanged like a warning. For a heartbeat, I swore I heard tires on gravel. I froze, holding my breath until my chest hurt. The sound faded into pine. I released the air in a shiver and set to work. Every lens I could reach got a harmless excuse. Tape, to keep bugs out. A scarf, to block drafts. A doily on a shelf. Because it looks nice. I kept my posture loose, my face blank, like an actress in a play about a woman who has never learned to be suspicious. By late afternoon, the light turned the pines the color of old copper. I wrote the date and time on a folded note. Evelyn Ward, present uninjured, acting of my own will, and slid it into the hollow under the third stair tread, the place Martin used for spare keys. No keys there now, but my note would live if I did not. That thought should have undone me. Instead, it made something stand up inside my ribs. Enough hiding. The flip phone buzzed once. A timid insect. A text. Are you alone? Reply yes or no. Nora. Bless her. I typed one word with hands that remembered steadiness. Yes. I typed with the care of someone diffusing their own life. Can't talk. Cameras. Need a plan. The flip phone stuttered and then sent, the screen light briefly washing the kitchen in a tired blue. Nora's reply was quick, the kind of quick that says she has already put on her shoes. We'll use plain words. Tea, safe, cough, trouble, storm, call sheriff, check in every hour on the half. I stared at the tiny letters until they steadied. I wrote back one word. Tea. I kept the radio hissing so any hidden microphone would have to ride static to hear me breathe. The Dutch oven bell over the lockbox sat like a stubborn hat. I moved around the room with soft hands and an apron tied too tight, playing the part of a woman who only cleans, never questions. But under that apron, my heart beat hard against my ribs like a fist against a locked door. I had spent years apologizing for wanting the thermostat higher, for asking Martin to lift the heavy suitcase, for telling Colin that his tone was too sharp. I could hear my own old voice saying, "It's fine. I'm fine." It had never been fine. The truth slid across my skin like cold water. I was done asking permission. I needed eyes outside. The porch boards popped when I stepped out, and the air slapped me with damp pine and a river iron. The afternoon had folded into a gray that felt like it had weight. Behind the shed, the grass grew tall enough to hide a person if that person did not mind ticks or shame. I opened the shed door slowly and let the smell of oil and old rope spill out. Inside, against the far wall, leaned an aluminum canoe scabbed with dents and memory. 2 paddles, a life vest with one broken strap. No motor. Good. Quiet is steadier than gas. Under a milk crate, I found a rust-stiffened toolbox and a coffee can full of keys, none labeled, all accusing. I pocketed the thinnest 2 and left the rest like I hadn't seen them. If a camera fed a man who wanted to count how many keys I took, he would only count 2. On the shelf, a flare gun sat in a plastic bag. I set it back exactly as it had been because I could imagine the wrong head seeing a weapon and deciding on a story that ended with me in handcuffs. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Half-hour check. Tea? I closed my eyes and pictured Nora's face, all soft angles and don't mess with my kids energy. Tea, I replied. Then, please watch county records. Title, my name. A pause, then, I will. And I'm driving by the property line at dusk. Lights only once. If you see them, it's me. Warmth moved through my ribs, fast and fierce. An ally on the outside tilts the world back a little. Inside, the generator coughed, and the kitchen light blinked down to a sullen glow. The radio faded to a whisper and came back thin, like bones under a blanket. I felt for the breaker panel. New labels, new handwriting. It was not grief that made my stomach turn this time. It was rage, quiet and bright as a match. I did not flip a thing. I went to the bedroom, pulled the towel off the deer's glassy face, and watched that tiny red pupil watch me. "You like eyes?" I said. Too soft for anyone but me. I tilted the vanity mirror so the mount's own dead stare reflected back at itself. Let whoever watched get a good, long look at their own watching. It was nearly dark when I dragged the canoe under the porch and angled it behind the skirting, out of the sight line of the kitchen window. The damp earth pressed cool against my knees, and the smell of it brought back summers when Martin swore he could tell rain by scent. I whispered into the boards, "Storm," just to feel the word, then pulled it back into my mouth and replaced it with tea. Not tonight, but soon. The flip phone buzzed again. Records show no change yet. If he tries anything, there's a hold I can file through a friend. You need proof of coercion. Keep notes. Photos. I typed, "Cameras everywhere." She answered, "Then make a show of being fine, and keep your shoes by the door." I looked down. I was still in my old slippers with the worn heel. The image of me paddling a river in those made my throat tighten with a laugh that wasn't funny. I set my walking shoes by the door and threaded the laces into quick knots I could yank loose in the dark. At the half hour, headlights ghosted through the trees. Off once, on once, then gone. Nora. The sight slid strength into me like soup into a cold stomach. I stood in the middle of the cabin and made a decision that felt like stepping over a line painted on the floor. I would not wait for permission. I would gather proof, set my own clock, and when the tide turned, I would not whisper. I would speak. Dawn came gray and close, the kind of light that feels like breath on your neck. I slid the canoe from under the porch, the aluminum scraping soft against dirt, and paused to listen. No birdsong yet, only the river muttering beyond the trees and the hollow knock of a loose shutter somewhere behind me. The air tasted like pine pitch and damp rope. I tucked the flip phone deep in my apron pocket, the walkie-talkie of a life I did not plan, and carried the paddles crosswise so they would not clack. At the tree line, I saw it. A trail camera strapped to a birch with a fresh nylon band, its eye a black coin in the pale bark. I did not look straight at it. I bent, pretending to retie a shoe that was already tied, and with the other hand I palmed a smear of river mud. A casual swipe on my cheek, another on the lens like a clumsy woman brushed it by accident. Not enough to blind it, enough to blur me. The small meanness of it steadied my hands. The river took the canoe like a quiet cough. I knelt low, kept the paddle blade shallow so the water would not slap, and counted strokes the way Martin used to count fence posts on long drives. 10 strokes to the first bend, 20 to the snag where a cottonwood had laid itself down last winter, 30 to the place where the bank rose and the old fire road should cut in. A heron lifted from the far shallows, legs trailing like string. My shoulders warmed, my fingers went numb. The current was stronger than it looked and tugged at the bow like an impatient dog. I let the canoe drift sideways behind a raft of brush and watched the shoreline. There, a rusted gate across the road and a new chain with a gleam that did not belong to the woods. I drifted past and filed the distance in my mouth like a seed I might plant later. Reachable, barely. The phone buzzed, a moth panic in my pocket. "Tea?" From Nora. I typed with my thumbs tucked inside the sleeves of my sweater. "Tea. River passable. Gate chained." She answered, "Clerk can flag filings by request. I'll bring forms to the fence line at dusk. 1 headlight blink." A yes rose in my throat like heat. Then another message. "If anyone arrives, remember our words." I breathed the word storm into my scarf and swallowed it again. Not yet. On the way back, I tucked a dry pair of socks and a granola bar into the life vest pocket and slid the canoe into its hiding place, brushing out the drag marks with a pine bough until the ground looked like it had never been touched. The wood smelled like iron and wet leaf. When I reached the porch, the door eased open under my hand as if it had been waiting. I always latch. Always. A small wind moved across the floor, and with it a thread of aftershave that did not belong to the dead and did not belong to me. The kitchen looked the same until I let my eyes soften. The Dutch oven was shifted a finger's width. The towel on the deer mount had been refolded, corners neat, a thing I never do. A coffee mug sat by the sink with a ring of brown that did not match my tea. Whoever had come knew how to leave a room almost itself, and that almost shattered something brave in me. I stood still until the shake in my knees turned into a single crisp decision. I took my courage in both hands and set a line of flour across the back threshold, thin as frost. I taped a hair across the closet jamb, end to end, so the next open would snap it. I walked the rooms again and reset every cover while humming off-key to the radio static, a woman too busy, too ordinary to be afraid. The phone buzzed once more. "Half hour. Tea?" I typed cough, then stared at the word. It sat there like a lit match, small and hungry. I deleted it and typed tea. For now. The "for now" was a stone in the pocket of my dress. I carried it to the desk, photographed the deed draft with the flip phone's tired little camera, and wrote the time and the weather in Martin's ledger, my handwriting cramped but certain. If they were watching, let them watch a woman who finally writes things down. The day narrowed toward dusk, like a hallway that keeps taking your shoulder. I packed a small go bag the way I used to pack for field trips. Copy of the deed draft, ledger pages, a sweater rolled tight, a little cash tucked in a vitamin bottle, then slid it into a hollow under the porch. 2 boards past the 3rd joist. The air down there smelled like earth and old nails. Back inside, the house wore its almosts again. The Dutch oven off by a finger's width, the towel on the deer folded too neat. The flower line behind the back door held a single crescent, not my shoe, and the hair across the closet jamb was snapped clean. Someone had come and left me a lesson. I can come, and you will not stop me. At the half hour, the flip phone buzzed. Nora's one question, our tie line. Tea? I answered tea and added, head to fence at dusk. 1 blink. My fingers shook a little after I hit send. The shakes of a person who is not scared so much as angry and done. I rinsed a mug just to have something to do with my hands, then cut the radio down to a whisper and waited for the light to thin. The woods took me in with the clean smell of sap and damp bark. I carried a tin of crackers, like a peace offering, a normal woman's prop. Every twig sounded like a decision. At the fire road, I crouched behind a bristle of scrub and watched the gate. Dusk laid a blue film over everything. Then, the promise. 1 headlight blink. A pause. A second blink. Nora's old wagon idled with its engine purring like a tired cat. She kept to the far side of the fence. I stayed on mine. We did not wave. She slid a manila envelope through a gap near the post. Inside were clerk forms with sticky flags where to sign, a cheap prepaid phone, and charger, a tiny flashlight, and a hacksaw wrapped in a dish towel. On a second sheet, in Nora's rounded hand, sat a simple plan. The clerk holds any filing until I appear in person with identification, and a note to flag suspicious e-recording. I signed where the flags told me, my name angrier and clearer than it has looked in years, and eased the papers back through the gap. The metal of the fence bit cold into my wrist. For a second, warmth pulsed there anyway. Being helped has a temperature. That was when a pair of lights floated up the road from the other direction, too high for Nora's wagon, too smooth. We flattened in the brush without speaking. A dark SUV eased to the gate and idled, the smell of new exhaust and expensive cologne sliding over the ditch grass. A man got out, broad-shouldered in a jacket that belonged to offices, not woods. He rattled the chain like he owned the sound and leaned close to the padlock. His phone lit the underside of his face. I did not see his features, but I saw the habit in the way he stood, the impatience of someone who expects doors to open. The SUV idled another few beats and then rolled away slow, like it had not been denied so much as bored. Nora and I stayed still long after the red taillights were murdered by the trees. When I finally breathed, it came out with dirt in it. We kept the plans small. She would deliver the forms first thing and call me about a recipe once the hold was placed. I would keep my check-ins and document everything. She slid me a tiny spiral notebook with a pencil stub and one more kindness, a granola bar, the kind with nuts that stick in your teeth. It made me want to cry. I didn't. I tucked it into my pocket like a promise and backed into the trees. Back at the cabin, the radio's whisper felt like a person in the next room. On the welcome mat sat a business card slid under the door. An elder care agency I did not know, an appointment date inked in neat block letters for early next week, the word intake. My name spelled right. My stomach dropped slow and heavy. Power of attorney does not always start with a pen. Sometimes it starts with a narrative. She is overwhelmed. She needs help. She will sign. The flip phone buzzed. Tea? I typed back, cough. Then I typed tea and sent both, because both were true. Morning came thin and cold, like the light had been strained through tin. The flip phone vibrated against the table. Nora calling about a recipe. Her voice bright in that way people use when they are saying something important they do not want, overheard. Use extra lemon today, she said. And I heard what she meant. The clerk filed the hold. Names, time, case number. I wrote it all down in Martin's ledger and felt my shoulders settle a fraction, like a book had been taken from the stack I carry. Then the card on the mat pulled my eyes back like a magnet. I dialed the agency using star 67 so my number would hide its face. A woman answered with a voice that smiled for a living. Senior Pathways, this is Whitney. I kept my tone small and careful. I found an intake appointment with my name on it. Who scheduled that? Papers shuffled. A keyboard clicked. Your son, Colin, and our care liaison, Darren Cole, she said, like she was giving me good news. Our driver will pick you up, and we'll do a safety assessment, a memory screen, and review a durable power of attorney packet so everything's easier for you. The words landed like gravel in my mouth. I didn't consent, I said. A pause, then that soft, trained sympathy. He mentioned you sometimes get overwhelmed. We try to take the burden off. The old me would have apologized for the oxygen I used by standing there. The new me looked at the deer's covered eye and let quiet do some work. Will Darren be there? I asked. Yes, she said. And we have a slot on Monday. I said very gently, I'll be ready. I ended the call, set the phone on the table, and pressed my palms against the cool wood until the sting in my eyes went back where it came from. Ready meant witnesses. Ready meant notes. Ready meant not being ushered into a signature under the soft blanket of concern. I thumbed a message to Nora. Hold confirmed. Intake says Colin plus a liaison named Darren, arranged Monday pickup. I agreed. Her reply came fast. Good. Public place. I'll be there. We loop the deputy in without spooking them. If they try to move you, I say storm. I felt that word settle in my ribs like a key in a lock. I told her the names, the time, the sentence they used about me getting overwhelmed. She sent back, let them say it again where ears can hear. The cabin tried to look innocent. The Dutch oven had migrated a breath. The towel on the deer wore a new triangle. The flower line at the back door sat unbroken, so whoever came had a key and a habit. I lifted the Dutch oven bell and laid my fingertips on the lockbox. Warm. Warmer than yesterday. Updated then. I put the bell back and, for the first time since arriving, spoke straight to the room. If you can hear me, I am not signing anything without my lawyer present. The radio hissed its agreement. I practiced being ordinary. I swept. I boiled water. I labeled my notes with times and names and exact phrases until my hand cramped and the page smelled faintly of pencil and lemon oil. Then I set the flip phone to record and called the agency again, pretending to confirm the appointment. Whitney repeated the words about the packet, the driver, the memory screen. No hiss of anger in my voice, only the small softness they expect from a woman they think is easy to move. I saved the recording and wrote the minute mark where she said power of attorney. Evidence is a ladder. You climb it one rung at a time, even if your knees shake. By late afternoon, wind picked up and made the pines lean into one another, talking in their black speech. I slid the hacksaw into the hollow under the porch beside my go bag and tested the coffee can keys in my pocket against the shed lock, one by one, humming to the radio to mask the tiny clicks. None fit. Fine. The river would not ask for a key. I texted Nora. If SUV returns, I'll try for a plate. She answered, I'll park a mile out with binoculars and a notebook. I stood in the doorway with my shoes tied and thought, I am not a problem to be managed. I am a person to be reckoned with. The room did not argue. By mid-morning, the sky had that flat tin color that makes sound carry. The prepaid phone pinged with a number I did not know, and Nora texted right after. Deputy Harlan Briggs will call on my line. Speaker only. Keep answers plain. When the phone rang again, I set it next to the radio, turned the volume low, and breathed once to push the shake out of my voice. Ms. Ward, a steady baritone said, this is Harlan Briggs with County. I understand you want the intake off private property. I stared at the deer's towel as if it were a person. Yes, sir, I said, keeping my sentences neat. He asked short questions. Who scheduled it? What was promised? Whether I consented to any guardianship or power of attorney. I said no, no, and no. He gave me a case number and a sentence I could repeat if anyone tried to hustle me into a signature. I declined to proceed without counsel present. I wrote the exact words in Martin's ledger and felt them sit in my mouth like a small steel coin. After the call, the cabin's quiet felt crowded. The lockbox under the Dutch oven gave off a faint, new tick, like a little jaw working gum. I moved through the rooms the way I used to move a classroom before a fire drill. Calm, busy, eyes everywhere. The flower line at the back door was untouched, but the closet hair had been threaded back across the jamb, ends retwisted, not my work. Someone wanted me to know they could make it look like I had imagined everything. That tidy cruelty cleared my head like a slap. At the fence line, I crouched in the scrub just before dusk with the tiny flashlight Nora had slid through. Wind nosed through the grass. The metal tasted like pennies on the air. Headlights rose slow up the fire road. I flipped the light once toward the plate, and then down. The SUV paused as if sniffing. Through the brush, I caught the shine of a dealership frame, Pioneer Ford, and a paper temporary tag with a corner peeled back. I snapped a fuzzy photo on the prepaid and slid into shadow. Two men got out. One had the office jacket posture I remembered. The other moved like family, familiar with the land, impatient with the gate. When he spoke, the word mom drifted across the ditch, soft and warning at once. Colin. My hands went so cold I could feel my pulse in my teeth. They did not see me. They talked low at the chain, about Monday, about getting her settled, about not letting this drag. The second voice, the smooth one that sells solutions, said my name wrong one time and right the next, like he was practicing. Miss Ward will feel relieved. The word relieved made my jaw ache. I kept still until my legs burned, then clicked one more photo when their taillights slid away. I texted Nora what I heard and added the dealership name. She sent back, leased fleet, likely the liaison. Good catch. Back at the cabin, a new business card waited on the mat. Same agency, same neat block letters, now with driver will assist with medications. I do not take any. My laugh sounded like a bark in the little room. I photographed the card, logged the minute, and recorded a calm, steady practice of my intake script. I declined to proceed without counsel present. I do not consent to any power of attorney documents. I am safe. I am of sound mind. Then I practiced it again, with a hand on the cool enamel of the stove, so the tremor in my wrist had something stubborn to lean against. Near midnight, the flip phone rang once and cut. A text followed from an unknown number. Heat wave tomorrow. Power might go out at the cabin. Sit tight. No name. No kindness. I stood in the dark and listened to the lockbox hum like it knew the message already. If they killed the generator, the cameras could run on batteries while I sat in the hot hush. Softer and easier to move. I whispered into the radio hiss. Not for whoever was listening, but for me. I am not a piece of furniture. The words steadied me like a handrail on a dark staircase. Heat arrived by mid-morning like a hand laid across my mouth. The generator coughed, steadied, then quit in a sigh that made the walls listen. The radio fell to a thin ghost of static. In the sudden hush, I could hear the tiny breaths of the cabin, the tick from the lockbox, the soft settle of beams, my own pulse climbing my throat. I moved on the plan I'd already folded and refolded in my head. Frozen bottles from the icebox to a basin for cool water, curtains drawn halfway, so it looked like habit, not fear. Both phones topped up and tucked in my apron like two small hearts. I set a battery lantern by the door, filled jugs, and stood still until the panic left my hands. I would not be softened by heat. Not for them. The prepaid phone pinged. Nora. Clerk hold. Confirmed in writing. Deputy will be nearby for intake. Public location set at the community center. You're covered. Hourly tea? I typed, tea, then added, power cut. Camera's still humming. She sent back, they want you tired. Stay cool. If visitors arrive, record. The word record settled in my palm with weight. I slid the phone to voice memo and tested it once. My own breath. A swallow. The small bump of the mic against my apron seam. Gravel whispered outside. Through the slit of curtain, sunlight flashed off a windshield. The SUV rolled in slow and sat with the engine a soft, expensive purr. 2 doors, then a knock that sounded practiced. I opened to Colin's smile, bright and brittle, and a man beside him in a summer blazer, sleeves just so. Mom, Colin said, that warning softness back in his voice. It's too hot for you out here. Darren wanted to check on you. We brought sports drinks. Darren Cole held out a paper sack like a peace offering, eyes scanning the room the way a realtor scans ceilings. Up close, he smelled faintly of cologne and new car, and he carried a clipboard with the lazy confidence of a man who assumes pens end things. I let the sack weigh my hands and stepped back so they could see the neat kitchen, the kettle, the tidy ledger open to today's date. Gentlemen, I said, my voice polite enough to make me proud. Before we speak, I need to say this clearly. I do not consent to any power of attorney documents, and I will not proceed without counsel present. Darren's smile did not slip, but his eyes did a quick blink. Of course, he said, Like the word meant wait. We'll circle back. They sat. The heat pressed at the window screens. Darren asked harmless questions shaped like a memory screen that did not call itself one. What day is it? Where are we? Who is the president? And I answered with details he did not ask for. The name of the river bend where the heron nests, the clerk's case number, the exact phrasing Whitney used about taking the burden off. I watched him write less as I said more. Colin fidgeted with his watch band and avoided my eyes. When he finally looked at me, I saw the boy who once sat on the kitchen floor eating cereal from the box. And then I saw the man who had slid a business card under my door, like a trap. "We can do a brief intake here to save you a trip," Darren said, lifting a brochure as if it were a fan. I felt sweat prick under my collar and let it stay. "No," I said gently. "Deputy Briggs has arranged a room at the community center. You'll meet me there. Plenty of witnesses. Cameras, too." The word cameras landed in the room like a second visitor. Darren's smile tightened by a hair. Colin's jaw jumped once. They tried kindness and they tried speed. I gave them water and time. When Darren accidentally left a slim packet by the salt, tabs poking out, the kind of pages people sign when they are tired, I nudged it back with 2 fingers and watched his eyes follow. "You forgot this," I said. He took it with a practiced apology that did not reach his face. At the door, the heat hit like a wave off a parking lot. I walked them out, and while Darren adjusted his cuffs, caught the temp tag's last 3 letters and the dealership frame again. My apron phone hummed, still recording, and in the reflection of the SUV's window, I saw it. The towel on the deer had been shifted during their visit, a new corner folded. Someone wanted me to know the eyes never blink. When they drove away, I exhaled in a shaky laugh that felt like a bruise healing. I texted Nora the partial tag and a summary, then wrote in the ledger the sentence I would not put down again. "I am strong, and I am not alone." The room did not argue. The lockbox ticked. Outside, thunder mumbled far off like a promise it was trying to remember. The community center smelled like floor wax and burned coffee. Air conditioning hummed with that steady municipal patience that says nothing dramatic can happen under fluorescent lights. Nora was already there in a denim jacket with a binder pressed to her ribs. Deputy Briggs waited near the bulletin board, badge clipped at his belt, posture easy but eyes awake. He greeted me with a quiet nod that landed like a hand to the small of my back. "Move forward. I've got you." Colin and Darren came in together. Darren in a crisp blazer that tried to sell calm. Colin wearing the face he saved for other people's mothers. There were seniors playing cards by the window, a youth coach stacking cones, the harmless noise of a small town doing its small town day. Good. Witnesses. Darren led with kindness poured from a pitcher. "Ms. Ward, we can keep this very simple." He set down a clipboard as if it were a napkin. I kept my voice even. "Before we begin, I need it on the record. I do not consent to any power of attorney documents, and I decline to proceed without counsel present." The deputy nodded, spoke for the room. "Voluntary only. No capacity determinations here today. Questions will be limited to services she requests." Darren's smile held steady, but the pen paused above the form. He shifted to a brief well-being screen and asked me where I lived, what day it was, whether I felt safe. I answered with names and places that belonged to me. The river bend where the heron nests, the clerk's hold number, the exact sentences the agency used about taking the burden off. When he tried to widen the questions, Deputy Briggs stepped lightly between us with a palm that said, "Enough." Nora slid a printed confirmation of the title hold onto the table and, without looking at me, tapped its lower corner twice. I followed her finger and read the timestamp. Then the prepaid phone buzzed in my pocket. One short vibration. A text from the clerk's office flashed up. Attempted e-recording just now under your parcel. Flagged. Rejected. My mouth tasted like copper. I handed the phone to the deputy. He read, then lifted his gaze to Darren with the kind of quiet that makes heat bloom in a necktie. Mr. Cole, is anyone from your agency attempting filings on Ms. Ward's property while you're here asking her questions? Darren did the small, professional blink of a man pulling a rug back into place with his foot. Absolutely not. Must be a mistake. The room heard him say it. The card players, the coach with his cones, Nora breathing through her nose like a metronome. Colin cleared his throat and said my name in that soft, scolding way. Mom, this is getting blown out of proportion. You've been under strain. I'm trying to help you. Something rose clean and cold inside me, like a spring. I slid Martin's ledger across the table, pages marked with times, names, and the phrase I had practiced until it lived in my bones. Deputy, this is my timeline of isolation. Cameras without consent, attempted home intake, and the agency's statements. I have recordings. I watched Colin read the lines that described him taking my phone, my keys, my voice. Color climbed his neck. The deputy's radio cracked with a brief burst of static, as if the cabin itself had cleared its throat. Here is what happens next, Deputy Briggs said, voice even, carrying. Ms. Ward will leave here today with her own phone and transportation. Any further interviews will be scheduled through counsel. My office will verify that e-recording attempt and the surveillance devices at the property. Mr. Ward, if you have her keys or phone, you will produce them now. For a heartbeat, the whole room held the same breath. Colin's hand slipped into his pocket. Metal clicked on laminate. He set down my car keys like they were hot. Darren's pen finally touched paper, but it did not move. The deputy looked at me, not past me. Ma'am, do you want to give a statement and request a welfare check at your cabin? I felt my own pulse settle. I pictured the deer's black eye, the towel refolded by a stranger's hand, the Dutch oven shifted a finger's width. Yes, I said. The deputy keyed his radio, calm as a surgeon. Unit to the Ward cabin, possible unauthorized entry and covert devices. Preserve scene. Colin whispered, Mom, please. And the words slid off me like rain off a waxed coat. I stood, slid the keys into my palm, and wrapped my fingers around them until the sharp edges left little half-moons in my skin. They felt like a door opening. They felt like a verdict about to land. We rolled up the fire road in daylight, cruiser first, Nora's wagon behind me like a small, steady moon. The air had that post-storm clarity. Pine needles clicked when the wind changed. Deputy Briggs walked through my door with a calm that made the room behave. Scene preservation, he said to the cabin, and the cabin seemed to listen. A tech knelt at the closet while I stood at the threshold, almost where I'd frozen the first night. The towel came off the deer mount. The tiny red pupil blinked its tired blink. The tech shot photos, eased the glass eye free, and held up the nested lens the way you'd hold a bad tooth that has finally been pulled. From the floor, the Dutch oven bell lifted with a tacky kiss. Inside the shallow cavity, the lockbox quivered faintly with heat. Cell uplink, the tech said, not unkind. Battery 2, someone liked you online. Bag. Tag. Serial recorded. No drama, just gravity. Gravel hissed. A dark SUV idled at the gate and then eased in like it had every other day. Colin climbed out first, face tight. Darren followed, smile prepared. They stepped onto my porch and stopped at the sight of a deputy in my kitchen and a state seal on a clipboard. Public consequences arrived like weather. "Gentlemen," Briggs said, even as a metronome, "we are executing a welfare check and preserving evidence of covert surveillance." He turned slightly so the room could hear the next words. "Ms. Ward has declined all power of attorney documents. Any further contact will go through counsel." Darren worked his tongue along his cheek, then said something about best practices. The deputy asked him, clearly, if any representative attempted an e-recording on my parcel that morning. Darren's smile held. Collins did not. I set Martin's ledger on the table and opened to the page that held times, names, phrases. My handwriting looked different now. Tall. Certain. "This is the record," I said, and the room accepted it. Briggs asked if I wanted to file a statement and trespass warning. I felt the old apology rise, then felt it pass right by. "Yes," I said, "and I want that warning served now." The deputy did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He read the terms on my porch while sun warmed the railing where Martin used to set his coffee. Colin blinked hard. Darren's pen finally stopped moving. A cruiser door opened and closed somewhere behind us with that round, official sound. And for the first time since I arrived, I exhaled without listening for footsteps. Inside, the tech sealed the last evidence bag. I reached up and smoothed the empty space where the deer's glass eye had watched me. The wood smelled like cedar and lemon oil and something clean, like a house rinsed after a long fever. "Do you want to leave for a bit?" Nora asked, soft. I looked at the canoe shadow under the porch, at my car keys pressing half moons in my palm, at the sunlight standing honest in my kitchen. "No," I said. "I'll stay." I opened every curtain. I wrote a new line in the ledger. Today I stood in my own doorway and did not ask permission. The room did not argue. Outside, the pines whispered, but they did not keep secrets for anyone anymore.